People keep trying to compare what's happening right now to the past, 2008, 1929. But none of those comparisons actually work. This collapse is different because every escape route that existed before has been quietly shut down. And the scariest part? It isn't loud, it isn't sudden. It's happening in plain sight while most people don't even realize what they're watching. America's financial system isn't failing from the top down. It's cracking from the bottom up. The cost of simply staying alive is rising faster than what people can earn, and the math of everyday life has stopped working. Debt is no longer a choice. It's a requirement. Families are now spending more just to service debt than they spend on food, not because they're reckless, but because survival has been pushed behind interest payments. On paper, spending looks strong. Airports are full, stores are busy, but underneath, the foundation is breaking. This isn't resilience, it's pressure. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Why every family is drowning in debt right now. Here's where it gets really ugly. Market yields start accelerating, and suddenly the federal government is backed into a corner where literally every option leads to complete economic devastation. There are no good choices left. None. Authorities either have to slash public spending brutally, jack up taxes aggressively, or just start printing money like there's no tomorrow. And here's the thing. Each one of these moves carries a death sentence for the economy. Deep cuts would trigger a massive recession. Heavy taxes would kill all investment. And just printing money non-stop? That would permanently destroy the value of the dollar. None of these options actually fix the underlying problem. They just let you pick which way you want the economy to die. This is that critical moment where the cost of just paying the interest on all this debt finally becomes more than the economy can actually handle. This pressure spreads out everywhere. Treasury rates become the main thing causing pain for regular people. As those yields go up, they drag every other interest rate up with them. Your mortgage, your car loan, your credit card balance. Corporate borrowing gets so expensive it's almost impossible. The whole industrial machine starts slowing down. What you're seeing is a complete breakdown in how supply and demand is supposed to work. The Treasury has to flood the market with more and more bonds just to cover deficits and roll over old debts. But global investors? They've backed off. Foreign countries? They've backed off too. When you have way more supply than demand, prices crash and interest rates spike. What used to stabilize the system has turned into this destructive feedback loop that's actually speeding up the whole collapse. This thing has gotten so massive there's no turning back. Federal debt is over $38 trillion now, pushing the debt to GDP ratio toward 125%. The math is completely upside down at this point. The government has to spend over $1.2 trillion every single year just to cover the interest payments. Just the interest. To put that in perspective, we're now spending more on interest than we spend on our entire military budget. And because all this debt is being refinanced at today's much higher rates, these payments just keep expanding automatically, sucking the life out of the economy without producing a single dollar of actual value or productivity. All this stress in housing and stocks is now crashing right into the US government bond market, which has always been the world's ultimate safe place to hide your money. Historically, when private investments like real estate or stocks started falling apart, people would move their money into treasury bonds as a safe refuge. But as we're moving through 2025, that escape route has been completely cut off. The bond market stopped being a safe place. Instead, it's become the exact spot where the whole systemic fire is starting. Your $15,000 debt is vanishing into thin air, and here's where it's really going. The economy is standing completely naked right now. All those artificial protections that used to shield it from the consequences of too much debt? Gone. Markets that became addicted to easy money can't count on emergency rate cuts anymore. Industries drowning in debt can't rely on cheap refinancing to bail them out. Even the federal government lost its ability to use the central bank to hide the mess. Safety valves have been welded completely shut. The whole financial structure is facing cold, hard reality now with absolutely no help coming to soften the blow. The main reason for this paralysis? Institutional legitimacy has completely collapsed. People already lived through brutal inflation, caused partly by the Fed's previous experiments with money printing. The public is not going to accept a repeat of that. Any attempt to go back to the old playbook of massive intervention would spark a political revolt and lead to total policy gridlock. The Fed's credibility has been completely spent, and the central bank's own balance sheet, that's become its own massive barrier to doing anything. With assets still over $7 trillion, any more expansion would basically signal to bond markets around the world that the government is now completely dependent on just printing money instead of collecting actual tax revenue. The second investors around the world realize that money creation has become the main way the government survives, confidence will disappear. Interest rates will shoot up beyond anyone's control. The authorities are completely stuck in this brutal lose-lose situation with interest rates. Rates had to go up to fight inflation that hit 9%. But if they suddenly pivot and start cutting rates aggressively, they risk starting a whole new round of inflation that would destroy whatever credibility they have left. But keeping rates this high, that just makes the pain worse across every single sector of the economy. It's a trap with no way out. The central bank is completely boxed in. They can't lower rates to save the markets without destroying the currency. And they can't protect the currency without crushing the markets. There's no good move left. This is a terrifying break from every previous financial disaster in modern times. Back in 1929, there was still room to expand credit and stabilize things. In 2008, the Fed was able to slam interest rates down from over 5% all the way to zero, while pumping the system full of fresh money. Those emergency options have just evaporated. The tools that used to work as the ultimate backstop for the American economy, they don't work anymore. The Fed can't print its way out of this one, because the very act of trying to save the system is now what threatens to finish it off completely. The American dream just broke, and nobody's talking about it. What makes this crisis so much worse than anything before is how broken the federal government actually is right now. During the Great Depression, the government's balance sheet was healthy enough to throw massive stimulus at the problem. Even in 2008, debt was sitting at a manageable 67% of GDP. So they had room to do multi-trillion-dollar bailouts. But that flexibility? It's completely gone now. National debt is hitting $38 trillion, with a debt-to-GDP ratio reaching 125%. The authorities are paralyzed. The same institution that used to be the ultimate stabilizer for the American economy has turned into its biggest source of chaos and instability. We're in completely uncharted territory here. The government is no longer capable of stepping in to catch the falling market. It's too buried under its own fiscal disaster to offer any real protection. This systemic weakness is made so much worse by a mountain of debt that makes the 2008 housing bubble look tiny by comparison. The Great Recession was mostly triggered by problems in one sector, housing. But our current situation? We've got toxic levels of debt piled up across every single aspect of life at the same time. We're dealing with a reality where credit card debt is over $1.1 trillion. Corporate debt has exploded past $10 trillion. Student loans are approaching $177 trillion. And hovering over all of this is a derivatives market estimated at over $600 trillion. There has never been a financial crisis carrying this many explosive pieces at once. It's not just one bomb with a burning fuse. It's an entire warehouse packed with explosives, where each one is capable of setting off all the others in a chain reaction that no safety net can possibly contain. When public debt gets this unstable, history basically screams a warning at us that we ignore at our own risk. We're navigating through a supercharged version of the exact same warning signals that came right before the two biggest economic collapses in modern history. What makes right now right? Uniquely dangerous is that every single risk indicator has been amplified to record-breaking levels. This isn't a standard market correction anymore. This is a structural breakdown where we're surpassing all the historical precedents in real time. There's no roadmap for what comes next. The speculative fever of 1929 returned with vengeance. Stock market price-to-earnings ratio peaked around 33 then, touching that threshold again now. Today's risk far more concentrated, majority of capital flowing into a tiny group of corporations. Late 20s speculators obsessed with automobiles and electrification. Modern market betting everything on single unproven narrative, artificial intelligence. Valuations pumped to historic heights on future hype long before financial payoff materializes. A skyscraper of speculation built on tech optimism, mirroring exact errors that led to 1929, but on massive integrated scale. Your house is about to become a ticking time bomb. Listen to this. The market right now is completely wired for a sudden, catastrophic crash. AI has been sold to everyone as this perfect revolution before it's even made any real, sustainable money. Investors have basically priced in absolute perfection. There's zero room for error. If earnings growth slows down even a tiny bit, those automated high-frequency trading systems will react in literal milliseconds. Minor dip transforms into cascading, unstoppable sell-off. Algorithms designed to exit at first trouble signal. Corporate insiders know these businesses best. Top executives offloading personal shares at pace not seen in years. When tech world leaders aggressively cash out, they have little confidence inflated valuations can be maintained. Structural vulnerability amplified by how the public invests. Most no longer handpick companies. They funnel wealth into passive index funds forced to automatically buy the same handful of tech giants. Everyone crowded into identical trades through identical funds. Any downward movement violently magnified. If leaders slide, millions of 401ks and retirement portfolios dragged down simultaneously. Collective panic feeds on itself. Market replaced diversity with automated momentum. Every retirement account hostage to performance of tiny stock group. Instability rests on 7 massive entities: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, Tesla, Nvidia. These corporations command nearly 30% of total S&P 500 value. 1% of the index dictates fate of the other 99. If even a single pillar buckles under hype weight, the entire American edifice crashes down. Extreme wealth concentration, market no longer broad reflection of country health, high stakes bet on very small circle, average household drowning under debt pressure, stock market record climb creates deceptive veneer of prosperity. Beneath surface lies classic bubble fueled by AI-driven transformation promise. Investors gambling on hope this technology eventually produces gargantuan profits. As of 2025, massive payoff remains purely theoretical. Prices soared into stratosphere based on future potential rather than current balance sheets. Living through definition of speculative mania. Market trajectory based on optimistic projections, far outpacing actual delivery. Your local bank is sitting on a disaster that could wipe you out. The second defaults start happening, the impact is going to hit the banks that wrote these massive loans directly in the face. When property values drop 40–60%, these loans become completely worthless. The capital reserves that major banks rely on, they'll vanish overnight. And when those reserves fall below what regulators require, you're going to see instability rip through the entire banking system like wildfire. Commercial real estate serves as dangerous transmission mechanism, carrying localized failures deep into national financial system heart. Not just landlord problem, threat to safety of every account and institution that provided original financing. Banking fragility driven by catastrophic commercial sector shift most underestimate. Remote work rise fundamentally broke office building value. Permanent national vacancy rates approaching 45%. Most properties secured with rates near 3%. More than $2 trillion in this debt now faces mandatory refinancing at 7.9%. Business model barely afloat under old cheap terms cannot survive new expensive reality. Property owners facing grim choice: operate at massive unsustainable loss or hand keys back to lender and walk away. Pressure just as intense on residential side. Home values detached from economic reality of people living in them. Properties trading at levels roughly 50% above historical averages, more severe than what preceded 2008. Primary issue is total death of affordability. Mortgage rates hovering around 7%. American household requires yearly income nearly $120,000 just to qualify for median home. Vast majority earn nowhere near that. Pool of potential buyers dried up. When demand for overpriced houses evaporates, values have no choice but to adjust downward, often violently. Entire real estate landscape became ticking time bomb ready to explode the moment stock market loses confidence. When investors search for exit, pressure shifts immediately toward property, residential homes, and commercial towers priced at heights they can't justify. Market artificially inflated too long. Disconnect between price and actual income becomes impossible to bridge. Foundation of American property market cracking under own weight. The stock market is one bad day away from chaos. Here's something that should absolutely terrify you. The federal government's ability to stop a banking collapse is dangerously weak right now. The entire system is vulnerable to sudden chaos. The FDIC insurance fund? It's holding about $125 billion, but it's supposed to guarantee $10 trillion in total deposits. Think about that for a second. It would only take a handful of major bank failures to completely drain that reserve dry. Once funds exhausted, only remaining path is direct government bailout. Federal finances already stretched to breaking by record debt and high interest costs. Lack of credible rescue plan means institutional safety nets far thinner than public realizes. Next major failure spreads without effective intervention. Systemic risk, fundamentally a confidence crisis escalating in hours. Modern banking operates on fractional reserves. No institution capable of surviving sustained mass withdrawal. Once losses hollow out capital, depositors rarely wait for explanations. They move money the moment instability whisper surfaces. First tremors during sudden collapses of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, First Republic. All disintegrated before formal recession declared. Not isolated incidents. Urgent warnings that same structural rot exists within dozens of regional institutions. Primary source of instability is massive toxic debt volume sitting on bank balance sheets, tied to retail spaces, hotels, office towers, national vacancy rates surpassing 40%, rental income required to service mortgages evaporated. Mathematical impossibility. Over $2 trillion in commercial loans approach mandatory refinancing at rates 2 to 3 times higher than original terms. Property owners simply cannot meet aggressive new payment demands, beginning to default in waves. Banks holding titles to buildings worth 40–60% less than outstanding loan balances they secured. The debt trap has no way out. This is pure math. We're living in an era defined by absolutely terrifying speed. Your financial situation can go from barely hanging on to complete disaster in just a few months. Credit card interest rates are sitting in this brutal 22 to 28% range right now. Mortgage costs keep climbing. Car financing keeps getting more expensive. The path to getting ahead financially? It's been completely sealed off. American family no longer climbing economic ladder. Caught in predatory trap with no visible exit. Not about choosing unaffordable lifestyle. Mathematical certainty born from reality where existence price skyrocketed while earnings remained stagnant. Numbers don't add up at month end. Debt becomes only available survival mechanism regardless of long-term consequences. Scale staggering. Total consumer liabilities surged past $17.5 trillion. Massive annual jump over 2%. Explosion in borrowing occurring even as inflation hollows out dollar value. Left households with less leftover cash than ever. Critical point reached. Population accumulating new debt at pace, far exceeding ability to settle existing balances. Race toward insolvency, where finish line moves further away daily. Not about overspending. Society forced to finance daily bread through high-interest credit because no other way exists to bridge gap. Deconstruct typical $15,000 debt burden. Suffocating layers of different obligations piled one on top of other. Mountain composed of home loans, car notes, drained credit cards, personal lines of credit, newer predatory installment plans. When tallied up, median household funneling more than $1 in $200 monthly just covering interest and principal. Equivalent of paying for second apartment without getting space. Dual-level catastrophe. Individual citizens drowning in red ink. Federal government sinking under own weight simultaneously. Two disasters, acting as feedback loop intensifying pain of the other. How one payment leads to total financial collapse. The entire American financial system is being held together right now by one single, desperate hope. That somehow your household income will eventually rise fast enough to outrun your debt costs. But let me tell you something. That's not happening. Instead, what we're watching is this dangerous domino effect where one debt problem automatically triggers the next one. Home loan resets to higher monthly cost. Families forced to lean on credit cards to make ends meet. Cards reach limits. Turn to personal loans to consolidate. Sources run dry. Begin cannibalizing home equity. Synchronized acceleration across every borrowing type. Self-reinforcing loop. Servicing old debt requires immediate creation of new debt. Average worker trapped in downward spiral with no safety net. Massive pressure felt by younger generation. Currently strangled by nearly $177 trillion in educational debt. Resumption of payments effectively draining billions monthly from consumer economy. Younger workers, who should be primary engines of growth and spending, watching huge paycheck segments vanish into interest for degrees obtained years ago. Simultaneously, transportation costs became own trap. Typical car loan approaching $25,000, locked into 7-year contracts. Monthly payments exceeding $740, essentially tied to rapidly depreciating asset offering zero financial flexibility. Completely exposed to any minor emergency. Credit card crisis evolved into second survival front. Balances growing over 3% in single year. Interest rates reaching 28%. Most families long since stopped using plastic for luxuries, now using it as bridge to cover gap when egg prices spike or utility bill hits record high. In high-interest environment, debt grows autonomously. Even if you completely stop spending today, compounding interest alone keeps balance climbing. No longer convenience tool. Mandatory subsidy for life too expensive to afford on standard salary. When everything collapses at once, the feedback loop of destruction. The American economy is entering this vicious feedback loop right now where every single thing that breaks makes everything else worse. Businesses are looking at shrinking demand and rising costs. So what do? They start firing people to protect their profits. Those layoffs immediately destroy families' main source of income, which makes it impossible for them to pay the debts they're already carrying, which then cuts national spending even more. Labor. Market deterioration no longer theoretical fear. Unemployment climbing from historic 3.4% low to over 4%. Tide officially turned. Currently sitting right at Sam Rule threshold. Reliable recessionary signal triggering whenever jobless rate rises, half percentage point above annual low. American workforce engine stalling. resulting income loss pushing entire system into deeper fragility state. Labor conditions worsen. Student debt weight acts as secondary anchor, dragging down most productive younger workforce years. Billions in potential consumer spending redirected monthly toward old educational obligations, providing zero immediate economic stimulation. For these workers, massive take-home pay portion spoken for before even received. No room to support struggling economy. Drain compounded by total automotive flexibility collapse. Typical car payments exceeding $740, loan durations stretching to 84 months. Owners have zero financial wiggle room. Currently 7.5% of borrowers, at least 90 days behind payments. Repossessions surge inevitably. Vehicle loss becomes crisis casualty, directly limiting ability to find or travel to new job. Mobility lack is final straw for consumer-based drowning in more than $1.1 trillion credit card debt. Highest volume in country history, interest rates frequently exceeding 21%. What used to be standard financial tool transformed into high-speed quicksand pit. Millions no longer using plastic for discretionary extras. Swiping cards just to keep refrigerator stocked and heater running. Seeing serious delinquency rates not witnessed since immediate aftermath of 2008 global financial crisis. Borrowing for survival became new baseline. But at these interest rates, strategy with very short expiration date. This is not warning. This is the collapse already underway. The chain reaction does not require panic to complete. It only requires time. And time is working in the opposite direction now. Each month adds interest costs. Each quarter locks in automation-driven job losses. Each year normalizes emergency measures as permanent infrastructure. Momentum builds even without single dramatic event. By the time consequences become visible to everyone, flexibility is already gone. The most important decisions are made earlier, quietly, while options still exist. The vulnerability ahead is not hypothetical. It is structural. And everything already in motion is converging now.